Thanks for coming, everybody, and I really want to thank primarily God here. Many prayers from my wife and a lot of others that are in this room here, and a whole lot of faith that I became a believer in Jesus Christ. And I celebrate recovery from drugs, alcohol, pornography, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I just want to touch a little bit on some of the people have heard me talk about how I grew up with not Rob and Laura, but the 1960s family. Everything was good. But there were things that went on. Nothing that was one would look at and say is really bad, but what would happen is, in our early days of life, we start off and we start fresh and we start up here, and slowly things start to happen, and hurts start to kick in, and those hurts start to lead into hang-ups, and those hang-ups slowly take us into habitual issues. I grew up in a family where I was taught that if you don't do good, we're going to embarrass you in front of people. That bothered me. It bothered me later. I had a brother that was 6 years older than I was. He had a different lifestyle. My father told me on many occasions, don't grow up to be like your brother. That hurt. By the age of 8 or 9 years old, I had already had my first couple of drinks. By the age of 8 or 9 years old, I was already introduced to pornography. Images. These images were 50 years ago plus. They're still stuck in my head, and they don't go away. When I moved into my later years into the elementary school and into middle school turned me into a person of anger, a person that was hot, and it caused a lot of issues. I lost a lot of friends. Something started to happen to me. This loneliness started to kick in. This isolation started to kick in. When I walked into high school, I was a straight A student. I was going to be an architect. I was going to go play baseball for a good college. Those were my dreams. We all have dreams. We're still up here. But these hurts started working. By the time I graduated high school, I was drinking constantly. I was doing drugs. All the drugs that were available in the 70s. I was an addict. By the time I walked out of high school, I was no longer going to be an architect. I was no longer going to play any kind of sports. I barely graduated high school because I was fixated on this new idolatry of drugs. Drugs and alcohol. I had no friends by this point in my life. I spent the majority of my time going to work. When I left work, I was already high. And I continued to drink. And I continued to do drugs. This was my day. My friends knew where to find me if they were looking for me. Tom was at the bar. But I didn't have any more friends. I was isolated. These hurts slowly turned into these hang-ups. So I'm just going to kind of touch on this little bit of my life as it went on, and we're going to get into what happens with these hurt habits. So as the adulthood started to kick in, I got married in 1980, and I was almost divorced within the first year because of my alcoholic behaviors and my drug behaviors. I hid the rest of my behaviors because that's what we're good at. We're good at hiding the things that we started to turn to that we thought made us turn into look better for us. But that's not what it was. Through my work, I hid my drug use. I was constantly afraid of what was going to happen, constantly worried about tomorrow and the next day. So, moving forward, what had happened is my brother had passed away in 1990. And there was a stretch of time where I wasn't doing any drugs, wasn't drinking. I hadn't drank since 1981. That's when I quit drinking, but I wish that was the end of the story there. The drug use took over. My father passed away in the year 2000. After that, I walked away to a job out of state and left my mother standing in her driveway in Chicago. And there was this hurt that she was my mom, and I left her hanging there. I came back to the area, and what had happened is in the early 2000s I had some back issues, and the doctors started to prescribe the opioids. And when I moved back from North Carolina to the Wisconsin area, I had to convince another doctor that those opioids needed to be stronger. And so the opioids started to continue in my system daily. My mother was slowly dying from Alzheimer's, and when she died in 2012, I felt something hit me, and it was this depression that my brother, my mom, and my dad took me to a camp somewhere and left me there, never to return. The hurt from that was terrible. I went to a doctor and they started me on the depression medications. Then they started me on something else. And when that wasn't working, they increased dosages. And then they added something else. This went on for the next 6 years. So between the opioids, the antidepressants, the high doses of it, the suicidal thoughts, it wasn't good. I had fallen deep inside a pit. And like I say, your hurts when you start, and we'll get into this a little bit, you start up here, and your hurts slowly take you to here, slowly take you to here. Your hang-ups start to kick in, and they slowly turn into habitual things. The addictions, the drugs, the alcohol. Life was pretty difficult. I had marital issues, I had work issues, I had friend issues, pretty much isolated. I was sick, I was in the hospital on and off because these medications were doing things to my body that I could no longer resist, along with the opioids and the other drugs that were going in my system. We talk about hitting bottom. We talk about hitting a wall in the program, and I hit that wall, and I hit that bottom, and we always hope that that's the bottom. In May of 2018, I had made the decision that I needed to get off of all of these chemicals. Through my doctor's help, as many people know that have been on the antidepressants, you can't just stop taking them. Okay? You just can't do it because your body's going to revolt. So, I was on a regimen of how to get off all of this stuff. The dope stopped. These drugs had to be systematically come down off of. Through this process, meeting with pastoral counselor, I had asked him, I said, well, does the church here have a 12-step program? And he told me about this thing called Celebrate Recovery. He said, but I need to kind of, let you know, because you see, I was godless. There was no God in my life. This whole time, I was on my own. It was the I syndrome. Every time I wanted to quit something, I could do it on my own. I can handle it. Nobody can do this for me, just me. I can do it. And that was the worst thing I could do. And he told me about this Christ-centered 12-step program called Celebrate Recovery. The very first night I walked in there, I heard about God as our higher power. And I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. And it took me a while. And I went back the following week. And I heard about God again and Jesus Christ. And I still didn't get it. Things started to happen to me. I started going to church, started listening to Christian music. More things started to happen. And they were all good things. So I started seeking out what Celebrate Recovery was. And I started to learn that, number one, it wasn't an I program. It was a we program. I started to learn that there is only one higher power, and that was Jesus Christ. Okay? I struggled through other secular 12-step programs for many reasons. One, AA didn't want to hear about my drug program. This program didn't want to hear about my porn problem. Celebrate Recovery wanted to hear about all of them. It was a place where I could come and dig down deep inside my bag of hurts and hang-ups and throw them all out on the table. And the interesting part was, the whole room was full of people just like me. I no longer had to do this on my own. Okay? So, there's Celebrate Recoveries all over the country. Celebrate Recovery is a national program that was originated out of California at Saddleback Church, and there's probably over 30,000 Celebrate Recoveries in the country. I don't need to sit here and tell you about my drug use and how bad it was, because those of you that have been there, those of you that have witnessed it with other people, you know how bad it is. So what I do want to get into, though, is these hurts and these hang-ups and these habits and the process that we take to get better. So, before I found Celebrate Recovery, I had a perfect life. Okay? I had a perfect career. I also had perfect walls that were around me that kept that pain in, and it kept everybody else out. I came to Celebrate Recovery out of desperation to escape the prison that I built for myself. I was completely broken, and the walls around me were falling down, and I alone could no longer fix this. So the first thing is, and I'm going to do a little correlation a little bit later on this, but the first thing is with hurts, is what are they? You know, what is a hurt? Hurts are emotional pain. Hurt originates from physical sources, non-physical sources. Sometimes the emotional distress is the result of a regret, grief, or loss. A A hurt can be classified as any life experience that may have damaged your heart. Some offense against you that crippled you. It's your ability to deal with the world in a healthy way. Something that may have twisted the view of yourself, God, and others. So again, we started up here, and these hurts started to make us tumble. These are just a list of some of them. Abandonment, divorce, neglect, rejection. I felt abandonment when my mom died. This is a hurt as an adult. I felt neglected at times. So these hurts slowly turned into hang-ups. Hang-ups are those roadblocks, those things that keep you from progressing further in God's plan for your life. They're often shaped by some bent thinking that we received as a child. Some unhealthy attitude you may have adopted as a means of coping with life's challenges. I can go through this list and one by one tell you about my anxiety. I can tell you about my worry. Codependency. Fear. I had 9 deaths when I was a child in our family in 8 years. I feared my parents were going to die of cancer all the time and leave me. And then they did leave me. I had greed. These are things we deal with as humans. But now your hurts started to turn down into here, and they start to become hang-ups. Habits tend to be in unhealthy patterns that often they start as a perceived remedy. Maybe if I smoke a little dope, I'll feel better. Maybe if I drink some more alcohol, I'll feel better. And pretty soon, you're just thinking you need to feel better all day long. It's a problem in your life, but it ends up turning into a chronic bad behavior and then an addiction. Habits are the repeat default scripts that you run to when the going gets tough and you continually lead to trouble in your life. Now, I want to make a quick correlation here of hurts, hang-ups, and habits, personal, with a business. I ran a business for a while. And when you start a business, you go out and you buy these beautiful new shelves, just like when you're born. And you bring in these new shelves because you've got to fill these shelves with inventory, right? You've got to put all of your inventory on there. Well, what happens is you start to bring in that inventory and the hurts start to build up, because what you really don't realize is that in some of those boxes in your business that you put on your shelf, there's some bad stuff in there. There's product that's no good. Products that's going to cause your business issues down the road. Okay? So now these hurts are slowly building up that you sometimes don't even recognize. Those hang-ups start to pick up. And it starts to look like this. Your inventory starts to get a little bit jumbled up in your business. And now you've got to work through all this stuff. And sooner or later, when these hang-ups get really, really bad, your business starts to look like this. This is now your inventory. This is your habits. This is what happened to my life. It started off nice and clean with empty shelves. And I started putting junk in there. Junk was thrown at me, and I started to add it up, and it got worse and worse and worse until my life looked like this. This is what I had to dig through. This is when your business or when you hit the bottom of the pit, okay? How do we get out of this? That's the tough question. Just a couple habitual facts, okay? Just imagine a congregation of 1,000 guys or 1,000 people. Just let's look at it that you've got 1,000 people out there. 10% of those people, 10% of those people are addicted to drugs and alcohol. 26% of those people struggle with mental health. Well, if these are all different people, you're already up to a third of your congregation. This is an interesting fact I just noticed the other day, done by a Christian group. Somewhere between 64 and 77% of Christian men view pornography on a monthly basis. That's a big number. Interestingly enough, only 18, and I say only 18 to 32% of them actually admit to being addicted to pornography. So how do we fix this? I tried to do it on my own, okay? I had an illness. I had a bad illness. But I keep saying I. And what we need to do is we need to change that illness, okay? We need to get rid of the I in the illness, okay? And we need to change that over to we, so it can become wellness. So this program that I've mentioned, Celebrate Recovery, who's it for? Who's it for? Do you have trouble setting limits for yourself? You might question what that means. There's five categorical boundaries here. There's the physical boundary of boundaries. It refers to your personal space, your privacy, your body. There's sexual boundaries. You have expectations concerning intimacy. Sexual comments and touches might be uncomfortable for you. Intellectual boundaries. Boundaries that concern your thoughts and beliefs. Intellectual boundaries that are respected when someone dismisses your ideas and opinions. Emotional boundaries refers to a person's feelings that you might not feel comfortable sharing. Financial boundaries. These are the five. Yeah, you guessed it. It's all about money. If you like to save money, not spend it on trendy fashions, you might not want to loan money to a friend who does. Do you sacrifice your own needs? You should never sacrifice your own happiness in order to please someone else. Love the things you love and the people you love. Be completely unashamed to who you are, because there's absolutely no reason to be ashamed of yourself. You're brave. You're smart. You should lead the life that God showed you. Do you struggle feeling safe when you aren't in control? Feeling safe is not having that soon-to-be falling off the cliff feeling. I always felt like I was falling off a cliff. Not worried about being criticized by those surrounding you. It's the ability to find that safe space inside yourself that was pushed away when you were a child. The safe space is naturally there when we're born. But we learn to lose our path to this place through the abuse and the neglect of adults who are supposed to care for us. You act kind on the outside, but you feel bitter on the inside. These are all reasons You can go through the list. Do you love somebody struggling with destructive behaviors? Pornography, drugs, alcohol? These are all reasons that one comes to celebrate recovery. We have a couple of exceptions on who Celebrate Recovery is not for. Unfortunately, due to the nature of some conversations, no one under 18 is allowed. It's an 18 plus group. It's for adults. And we have one other group that we struggle with. No perfect people allowed. So, the program works on a couple of things. We work on the 12 steps. The 12 steps start with honesty. After many years of denial, we begin with one simple admission of being powerless over our addictions. Faith. Faith is the second step. Before Jesus Christ can begin to operate, you must first believe that you can. You need to surrender. You can change your self-destructive decisions by recognizing that you cannot do it alone. Soul searching. You must identify those problems and get a clear picture on how their behavior affected yourself and others around you. Integrity. Step 5 provides a great opportunity for our growth. The person in recovery, we admit their wrongs. Acceptance. The key to step 6 is acceptance. Step 7 is humility. It's asking Jesus Christ to do something that cannot be done by yourself. Self-will. Willingness. Help step to make the list of those that you've harmed before. Forgiveness, making amends may seem challenging, but for those serious about recovery, it can be a great way to start your healing. We get into the maintenance then. Nobody likes to admit to being wrong. We start making contact. That's the purpose of step 11, and we do service. In recovery, you must carry the message to others and put the principles of the program into practice. We all have hurts, hang-ups, and habits. What's yours? Every problem in your life has the same root cause. Every problem in your life starts when you play God. The next part of this program that we work off of is the Beatitudes. You see, Jesus started his famous Sermon on the Mount by saying this. He says, I want to tell you 8 ways to be happy. And the way you think you're going to be happy is not all the way that the world tells you to be happy. See, Jesus states each of these 8 ways to healthy in what's called the Beatitude. And we refer to them as life's healing choices. Long before there was a recovery or an addiction program, Jesus used one of his greatest sermons to lay the foundation of the healing from every hurt, hang-up, and habit. The first beatitude is the first healing choice, which I refer to as the reality choice. It's for getting rid of those hurts, hang-ups, and habits that mess up your life. And what does it mean to be poor in spirit? It means I admit I need help and that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. That is what it means to be poor in spirit. It means to acknowledge that I can't control and manage everything in my life, but I need God's help. The second choice is the hope choice. It's the choice to earnestly believe that God exists and that I matter to him and that he has the power to help me change. The third choice is the critical choice, because the next 5 really build on what you make a commitment to, this or not. This is why we call it the commitment choice. The fourth choice is called the house cleaning choice. We make this choice when we say, I openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and another human being. The fifth choice is the transformation choice, in which you voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask Him to remove the character defects. The sixth choice, the relationship choice. The seventh choice is the growth choice. Start to grow spiritually and healthy depending on maturity when reserve a daily time for Bible reading. And the eighth and final choice is the sharing choice. It's when I turn outwardly to help others to take these steps. It's part of being a peacemaker, and it's really the great result of having started walking through recovery. Nothing is more contagious than life-changing power. Many people hear that naughty word, recovery. Think the program like Celebrate Recovery is just for those people addicted to drugs and alcohol. But the reality is, while chemical dependency is an issue addressed by Celebrate Recovery, there's not the only one. In fact, only 1 in 3 people come to CR for drug and alcohol. So if you struggle with any hurts, hang-ups, and habits, guys, I invite you to join us every Friday night here, 6:30. We meet down in the clubhouse. So it's an amazing spiritual experience, and I think I've run out of time. They've been cutting me off for the last 10 minutes. No. So if there's any questions, you can probably find me down by the booth down there. And if you need any copies of any of this, just grab a hold of me down there, and we'll get some emails, and I can get copies of these out here.